Well, to another live stream. I'm back, Dr. Keith Fairclough, your relationship and emotional intelligence specialist. And today we are going to be talking about forgiveness and compassion. Yesterday we talked about the importance of not taking things personal. We also threw some emotional regulation things in there. I didn't practice any of them, but did talk about them. So if you haven't seen that, definitely go back and check that. Like I was saying yesterday, you got to make sure you have all these steps. We're going to eliminate resentment. We got to have all these things, all the parts. If you're missing any one of these parts, the whole thing falls apart. All right. So it's critical to make sure that we have all the parts of this process, right? The emotional regulation, the not taking things personal, forgiveness and compassion, which we're going to be talking about today, boundaries, which we'll talk about probably tomorrow. And then we'll talk about operating excellence, which is the thing that kind of ties everything together so that we can make sure we're not going to ever have resentment again, right? So, I'm not really with all the marketing gimmicks and, dropping little things so you can stay to the end. Listen, if this is important to you, if resentment's destroying your life, then you'll stay to the end. If it's not, then you could keep scrolling on to whatever else, right? But we're going to be talking about forgiveness and compassion, right? That's what we're going to be talking about today. And this is, I think, a really important thing for all of us to get a handle on, because resentment, we already talked about how resentment is the story with incomplete pieces of information that we tell ourselves to protect ourselves, right? We personalize it, make it about us. They said that about us. They hurt us. It's all about us. And then we build this and we hold on to things, right? And that's what the live stream is about. It's about you're holding on to these things, and we got to learn how to let it go. Right? We got to learn how to let these things go. And we'll talk about why we have to learn to let these things go. Before we talk about why we got to learn to let these things go, let's just hop into it. First and foremost, what is forgiveness? Right? When you think about forgiveness, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? So my personal definition of forgiveness is the complete release and erasure of a debt, right? Whatever debt was owed, right? So if it's money, talk about like student loan forgiveness, right? Once it's forgiven, that loan is wiped out and no longer exists. You're not held accountable to that anymore. Everything's been satisfied. We're free from it, right? So that's what forgiveness is. It's releasing somebody from the debt of the offense that they done to you, whatever thing they did to you, right? It's no longer in play. We're not bringing it back up. We're not going to talk about it at the family dinner. We're not going to bring it up 10 years later. It's a complete and total erasure and release from that debt. We're not holding it over someone's head, right? So if you find yourself dangling something over someone's head, but yet you say you forgive them, right, then you probably haven't forgiven them. And we'll talk about that a little bit more at the end as well, right? About how do you know if you actually forgiven somebody? We'll talk about that more at the end. So the first thing is, again, forgiveness, complete and total erasure of debt. Right. But forgiveness without compassion is very, very difficult. And so now what is compassion? Compassion is the understanding, validation, and empathy towards another's experience. That's what compassion is. It doesn't mean you agree. It doesn't mean you just give them a pass to do whatever they want. It's simply, I understand what you've went through. I understand how you got to this point. I understand why you move and operate as you do. And my heart goes out to you. I get it. My heart goes out to you as to why that happened. And if you listen to any of my live streams or any of my other videos or things like that, you'll know a lot of how we've been formed, and a lot of how we are now was formed when we were nowhere. Really, we're really young, right? 7 to 10 years old. A majority of how we are, a majority of how we think, a majority of how we move and operate is based off of that programming. And unless we've changed, unless we've done the actual work to grow and mature and change our beliefs, our operating system, we're running off as operating systems of when we were 7 to 10 years old, because that's when majority of our beliefs are made. I think it's up to like 85% of how we're going to be is determined by 7 years old. I think up to 95% is determined by 10 years old. So a majority of how we're going to be is established in that time, right? So when you see an adult, reverting back to a certain behavior, or they're having a tantrum, right? For perfect example, you might have uh, I'll just say you might have some people that they would call someone a Karen or something like that, right? Because she's upset and she's having a tantrum in the store and wants to talk to the manager because, you know, there's hangers on the floor, something along those lines. That's not a grown woman that's operating. That's not a grown woman, you know, that's 30, 40, 50 years old that's operating that time. And this isn't like throwing anybody in the bus. I'm just talking about the operating system that she's running off of. Whatever triggered her took her back to that point in time, right? The same thing, like I went before, I used to be a trigger for me of being accused and blamed for things I didn't do. That took me back to when I was younger. So when I would shut down or when I'd blow up, that was the younger version of me, right? So, and we've all can attest to this. There's some behavior, some trigger, something that we've done or continue to do even now that was born out of when we were younger. And so I know a lot of times, like again, Robert Karen, people want to look at the videos like, oh my gosh, you're so ridiculous, yada, yada, yada. But yet when someone comes home late, you're losing your stuff, right? Your kids don't listen to you to go to get a bath, you lose your stuff, right? Because now it looks like disrespect. And it reminds you back when you were younger, when you would speak up and no one would listen to you. All right. So we got to be very careful. They say those who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. So we got to be very careful. And this is why, you know, compassion is so important. For one, you have to recognize that I'm no better than anybody else. I'm no better than anybody else. I'm not better than anybody else. You're not better than anybody else. None of us are better than anybody else. Because you start digging into anybody's life, my life, your life, any of our lives, I can guarantee there's going to be things that we're shameful of. There's going to be things that we, you know, that doesn't align with our character. There's going to be certain deficiencies we might have that we haven't finally worked out, especially in our relationships. You know, so we got to be very careful about how we throw around judgment like that. It's better just to be compassionate. It's better to focus on, let me try to understand and validate and empathize where someone is coming from, because I would want someone to do that for me, right? So the compassion portion of this is really, really important, because that's how you're actually going to be connecting with people. That's you're going to actually being able to understand people, especially those close in your life. Right. So I know it might be a little bit more difficult for those outside of us, right? The cash register, the cashier at the store, you know, the stranger you might bump into, something along those lines, the guy that maybe bumps your shoulder on the street or something along those lines. It might be a little bit more difficult for us to do, you know, have compassion with them, because you don't know their story. You don't know what their experience is. You never had time to even talk about it. But for your wife, because this is about relationships, with your wife or your husband, you guys should have had those conversations about your childhood, about your, you know, the shortcomings, the things that maybe you were lacking, the things that you were struggling with, you know, and maybe the work you're supposed to be doing in those areas. But we should understand where each other's coming from. You should understand why someone might be defensive. You should understand why someone might be explosive and things of that nature. And I want this to be very, very, very clear. Just because I understand, just because I validate, and just because I empathize doesn't mean the behavior is okay. Let me say it one more time. Just because I understand where you're coming from and why you do what you do, just because I understand, you know, I can validate and that makes sense. Just because I can empathize with the hurt and pain you experienced at that time, and maybe even the hurt and pain you're experiencing right now, I can empathize with you. That does not mean I am condoning the behavior. It simply means I get it. That's all compassion is. I get it. And for those of you of the faith, I want you to think of it like that. You ever wonder why God is able to forgive us for all that we do, all the sins, and then beyond just dying on the cross, things like that? How he's able to have such great compassion for us, because he knows every single aspect of our life. He knows exactly why we struggle, what we struggle with, why we blow up, why we're defensive, why we shut down, why we run, why we're anxious. He knows exactly why. You know, detail on top of detail on top of detail. So because he has that compassion, does that mean he condones our behavior when we mess up? Does he condone when there's infidelity? Does he condone when you're cussing your spouse out? Does he condone when you're putting your hands on, or does he condone, you know, yelling, screaming, and cussing and fighting each other? He's throwing stuff around. Does God condone that? Of course he doesn't condone that. He just says, I get why you guys do what you do. I get that. That's how I'm able to have compassion on you and able to forgive you when you ask for forgiveness. Right? I'm able to erase that debt and release you from it. So compassion is really, really important part of this process. And I implore you, take some time. If you know your spouse, and you've heard the stories, take some time and actually get deep on them. Don't look at it at surface level. If they told you that they were beaten when they were a child and they were beaten with an extension cord, for example, all over their body, something along those lines, like think about what that's like from a child's point of view. The person who's supposed to protect you, keep you safe, love you, pour into you, is hurting and abusing you in a horrible and abusive way. Because I'm sorry, I don't know, I don't care how anyone came up, beating a child with an extension cord all over their body, that's abuse. Period. You're not teaching them anything but fear. That's abuse. That's not correction. That's abuse. Right? Tearing your kids up until they start bleeding, that's abuse. Right? I know some of us come from the old school. We might be like, oh, that's what's wrong with these kids. No, it's not what's wrong with these kids these days. That's a whole nother topic for another time. But what I'm saying is, when you start thinking about your spouse in that way, you start thinking about how they were alone or they were abandoned and no one cared about them. And do you think about them in that childlike form, being treated that way? I'm telling you, it changes everything. It opens up your heart to what they experience and what they go through. I'm telling you, it goes a very, very, very long way. In this process, eliminating resentment, you can almost say that compassion is like at the heart of it. Because once you're not taking it personal, and you can actually put yourself to the back burner and start looking and seeing, okay, where's this coming from? Oh, this is probably coming from the hurt or the abuse or the neglect or the abandonment they experienced as a child. And you think of your person you love the most as a child, and how can you not have compassion on them? How can your heart not go out to them? It's almost like heartbreaking. Imagine watching a child getting beaten, or a child getting left, or a child being hungry, or a child being passed around from house to house to house and have no stability. A child not having clothes and not having clean clothes and not having a father in the pit. Imagine, this is what a lot of our spouses have been through. This is a lot of us have been through. So when you start thinking along those lines, it's a lot easier to have compassion. A lot easier to have compassion. I promise you that. Promise you that. So that's what compassion is. Right? So now let's move on to why forgive? Why have compassion? Isn't it easier to judge? Just, oh, you're a horrible person, or my wife's a narcissist, or my husband's a sociopath, or whatever the case. Isn't it? It's easier to judge, right? It's easier to just, come to some type of agreement within ourselves that, oh, they're just a horrible person. There's no, who cares about the reason for why they're an adult now, because I've heard this before. They're an adult now. They just need to get it together, right? They just need to get it together. Enough's enough, right? So, why forgive? They're just going to do it again. Why have compassion? Who cares about that? They need to get over it. That happened a long time ago. Okay. All right. Let's break all of that down. Okay. Now let's take your wife or your husband out of the hot seat, and let's put you in there. Let's put me in there. Right? Now, do you want someone telling you what you experienced? Just get over it. Not a big deal. Imagine if you were molested or raped as a child. Should someone tell you to get over it? It's not a big deal. You were homeless and on the street, and should someone tell you that? Just get over it, man. It's not a big deal. It's not a big deal. And you think about some of these things, right? You watch your mom or your dad, you watch your mom get beat by your dad. Just get over it. It's not a big deal, man. You're you're an adult now. Just get over it. I want you guys to think about that, because this is what we say to the person we say we love the most. We tell them that the things that they experienced, it's not a big deal. Just get over it. Hey, you brought that up enough. You brought it up enough. Stop. You're just using it as an excuse. You're just trying to get away with this behavior. Can you imagine someone saying that to you and how you would feel? And you might say, I would never feel any kind of way. That's not true. That's a lie. You know it's a lie. I know it's a lie. We all know it's a lie. If it was something, it was important to you, something that was meaningful to you, something that meant something to you, whether it's your experience or whatever it might be, and someone just completely and totally dismissed it and just threw it to the side like it was nothing, and especially the person who's to be closest to you, that's not going to have an effect on you? You think you're just going to move along and just be like, oh, yeah, everything's fine? And granted, we're not talking about like, oh, I can go off and live my life. I'm talking about you're trying to have a romantic connection with someone, and they're saying that your experiences don't matter. They're saying you should just grew out of that. How close do you want to get to a person like that? How close can you get to a person like that? You can't get close to a person like that, dismissing their experiences and things like that. So back to why we forgive and why we have compassion, right? Like we do it for one. Let's start with compassion. First and foremost, let's start with forgiveness. Start with forgiveness. Why do we forgive? Right? We forgive because it frees us. That's why we forgive. You think that you holding on to that resentment, you think that you holding on to that offense, you think that that's doing anything to the other person? Do you think that's causing them not to sleep at night? You think that's causing them not to be able to get up and go to work? You think that's causing them not to get up and go feed their family or do whatever they need to do? You think holding on to that's doing that? You think it's stopping the show for anybody? It's not. Especially, it's not. I will say this, it'll stop the show in your relationship, because as you hold on to more unforgiveness in your relationship and build that resentment up, you guys are going to become more and more and more and more and more distant. But outside of that, it ain't stopping no show. You're looking, I hate her. I can't believe who does she think she is? Or, man, look at him. He just thinks he's just hot stuff, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But like, holding on to the resentment, it's not hurting anybody. I think someone said like holding on to unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping it's going to kill somebody else. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. So why we forgive because we want to be free. I don't want to be left holding the bag, right? Because here's the thing, and this is, and I think this is the right way to go about saying this, right? Because we talk about the complete release and erasure of debt, right? We said that's what forgiveness is. So think of yourself as the bank, right? Think of yourself as the bank. And this person, whoever the offender is, their offense took something from you, right? Now the debt, so the debt sits with you. The debt doesn't sit with them, the debt sits with you. Very similar, like if you get, they close out your credit card or something like that, you don't pay it back anytime, the debt sits with the bank. The bank loses out because the bank's the one that loaned the money out, right? So in order for the bank to move forward, they can keep chasing you down. Chances are they're not going to get anything from you. You owe them $300,000. You don't have $300,000. So the bank has a choice. They can continue to pour money, time, energy, and effort into chasing down someone who's probably not going to pay them back. Or they can say, you know what? Never mind. You know what? Put it on the ledger. Let's just keep it pushing. Let's just keep it pushing. If they never pay us back, it's going to be what it's going to be. Let's keep it pushing. Chalk it up as a loss. Take it right off on the taxes or whatever, and we'll keep it pushing. When we do the exact same thing when we forgive somebody, right? Because if we don't forgive, we're holding the debt. We're holding the hurt. We're holding the pain. We're holding the resentment. We're holding the bitterness. We're holding the hypervigilance. We're holding on to all of that, all of it. And it's destroying our body. Just like if the bank were to go and try to keep pursuing somebody, it's going to destroy their bottom line even more, right? So what we need to do is that we forgive, because I want to be free. I don't want to hold on to hurt. I don't want to hold on to hate. I don't want to hold on to frustration. I don't want to hold on to hypervigilance. I don't want to hold on to my nervous system being shot. I don't want to hold on to having negative thoughts in my mind or in my brain every single time. I don't want to hold on to that. I don't want to hold on to that. That's too much weight to carry. So I'm going to release you of the debt. I forgive you. And here's the beautiful thing about it. You don't even have to be in the presence of the person you're forgiving. Granted, this is about being in a relationship, right? So you're going to be in the presence of the person you're forgiving. But you release it, though. You say, I'm not going to hold that against you. Especially, again, if you're married. Again, because you have the compassion. You understand that, okay, I understand why they're doing what they're doing. I understand why they move as they move. I understand where this is coming from. I'm not going to hold it against you. I'm going to release that. I'm going to release it and let it go. I'm not going to hold on. I'm not going to bring it up. I'm not going to throw it back in your face. Nothing like that. Now, real quick, I do want to put in here. So we're talking about this specific offense. But if there are repeated behaviors, right? So it's not the offense. So if you were to go back and another situation happens and that offense comes up again, then it's that offense we're talking about. And for those of you who might ask, well, what do you do if that happens again? We'll talk about that in a second. Just stick with me, right? So first thing, forgiveness, it frees us. It's free. I'm not holding on. I'm not looking at this person, my spouse, and I'm looking at them like, oh my gosh, I hate them. They're so horrible. Oh my gosh, I can't believe what they did to me. I'm not allowing myself to get into negative sentiment override. That's another thing it does as well. It keeps you from having your mind slide into negative sentiment override. And anyone who knows what negative sentiment override is, NSO, I think it's from the Gottmans. I believe they created it. It's essentially when your brain is trained to find all the negative a person does. So when you forgive, you prevent your brain from doing that. And what that does is, so basically what happens is normally when you're doing when you have negative sentiment override, everything they do is wrong. You don't ever give the benefit of the doubt. Oh my gosh, I can't believe they did this. Or I can't believe, they left the food in the oven for an extra minute. Gosh, they don't ever pay attention. Like let's say you rush downstairs and get it out. Nothing wrong with the food, but you're thinking, oh my gosh, they're always upstairs doing that, playing their games or doing their hair or whatever the case may be. You're only thinking negative constantly. There's nothing they can do right in your eyes. That's what happens when you hold on to unforgiveness. That's what happens when you hold on to resentment. All you see is the negative. And unfortunately, they say perception is reality. So if you create the reality that all they do is wrong, you're going to be miserable. Your marriage is going to be miserable. Your relationship is going to be miserable because all you're looking for is how they mess up. Matter of fact, you start manufacturing ways how they messed up and manufacturing how, they're irresponsible. Like, for example, if it's 1 minute, right? It's not a big deal. Or if you guys are going to an event and it's like you guys are 10 minutes late, but it really didn't make a difference. And you're sitting there complaining, oh my gosh, you're so irresponsible. You never want to be on time. And this and that, and then and you're just going on and on and on and nagging and nagging and nagging. And it's like it makes no difference on the other side. Like no one is pressed on the other side of that. Though that's what negative sentiment override looks like. Forgiveness keeps you free from that. It keeps you free from that. Right? So we want to be free. We don't want to be left holding the bag. Erase the debt and we move on. And then why compassion? Compassion protects us. Again, going back to that negative sentiment override, right? You give people the benefit, not even saying the benefit of the doubt, but what you're doing is you're looking at the person. If it is a set of behaviors that keeps happening, you understand why those behaviors are happening. Same way, like, again, for those of the faith, same way like God looks at us, and if it's the same behavior that keeps happening over and over again, the same mistakes over and over again, he understands why. So the Bible says, when Peter's like, how many times do we forgive our brother? Up to 7 times. And Jesus said, no, I say not up to 7 times, but 70 times, 7 times, right? Which is an unlimited number of times. Right? So forgiveness and compassion needs to always be there. But again, the compassion protects us. Again, it lets us realize it's not about us. It's about what their experience is. It's about what they've been through. That's a protection. So forgiveness frees us, and then compassion protects us because I know where this is coming from. And let me also say this, because I did say something a little bit earlier as far as like it's hard to know people that are not in your inner circle or in your circle, right? So you're out in the street and you're seeing strangers, someone bumps into you, things of that nature, unless they have some type of reaction, right? So you can even still have compassion for those people as well without having all the factual information. And how do you do that? Just know what regular behavior looks like. So if I bump into someone in the store, regular behavior says, oh, I'm sorry. They say, oh, no, it's okay. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I wasn't watching where I was going. That's regular behavior. That's normal human interaction. That's how a majority of our interactions happen if we make a mistake out and about. You usually don't see people popping off, blowing up and things of that nature, right? So when you see something that deviates from normal human interaction, so if you go to a cashier and the cashier is having like the worst type of attitude ever, that's a deviation from normal human interaction. There's something else going on. Maybe she had a bad day. Maybe she's struggling with something. I never forget. I remember one time I was working with a client on this, and they were talking about some of their coworkers that were exhibiting some behaviors that deviated from normal human interactions, right? And so we started talking about what basically about compassion, about forgiveness, and and how to really look beyond ourselves, right? Again, not take it personal. And then come to find out when we met again after that, they had talked to the people, and guess what? These people were going through some really heavy things. Oh, so it wasn't about my client. It wasn't about us. It was about what they were going through, and this is just a manifestation of what they're going through. Listen, people are going through some really heavy things, right? You fighting battles you have no idea about. Some people are on the verge of not being here anymore. Right? So for us to think that every interaction outside of ourselves is all about us, it's just inaccurate. So even if you're out and about, you can still have compassion on people, because again, if they do something or operate or move outside of a normal human interaction, then you know something else is going on. So you can have compassion on them. I don't know what's going on, but I hope you have a great day. You know, it sounds like you're going through it. Some kind of kind words could go a long way. You have no idea. Sometimes it's just a smile can go a long way, right? But now imagine, because I feel like I'm not all over the place, but I feel like I'm not really honing in on a relationship, right? So in a relationship, right, this goes even a longer way, right? That patience you have with your significant other, right, with your husband, with your wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, like this goes a very, very, very long way. So that's why we forgive. That's why we have compassion. Right. And so now, how do we forgive? What does that look like in practice? It's one thing that people say that you just got to forgive, you got to forgive, you got to forgive, you got to forgive. What does it actually look like in practice? It could be one or two things. One, you can let the person know, right? Like, hey, this is something I've been holding on to, and I just want to release it. These are some thoughts I had about you. I just want to let you know, I want to release it. I want to forgive, right? I want to forgive you. Or you can do, again, you don't actually have to be in the presence of the person in order to do it. Because let me also say this. Sometimes when it comes to forgiveness, it can be used and weaponized. You come to, for instance, you might come to someone like, you know what, I forgive you for all the yelling and cussing and screaming you were doing the other night, and I know you're just going through it and you're just struggling, so, poor you, hey, but I'm going to be the bigger person and I'm going to let it go. Like, no, that's not how we want to do it, right? That's not how we want to do it, right? If you've shared with someone that, hey, this thing hurt me, right, and they know, and you shared it with them already, right, then you can go back to them and say, you know what, hey, when this objective, you can use sir again, right, when this objective thing happened, right, when you called me, this name, that really, really hurt my feelings. That really hurt me, because it reminded me of like when I was a kid and I was called that name by my father or by my mother. So what I'm going to do, I want to release you from this though, right? I don't want you to, be ashamed or anything like that. I just want to let you know I'm not holding on to it. I'm letting it go because I care about our relationship, and I know it was a tense conversation, so I just wanted to let you know I'm releasing it. I'm not holding on to it. I forgive you and I'm moving on, right? So the difference there is the other one I did before was all the other person focus. Oh, you're a mistake. You messed up. You did all this stuff. And now I'm this, this holier than thou person that's just releasing you from it. That comes off as condescending. What I did the second time, actually, if you don't notice, I did the SIR method again, right? Situation, emotion, reason. But this time it was like a repair, right? Or you could say a release because you're releasing them, right, from it. And so with that, I'm focused on me. I'm saying this is what I experienced. This is the way I took it. This is how it affected me. And I'm going to want to let you know that I'm releasing that. I'm not holding that against you. I just want to let you know I'm not holding it against you in any way, shape, or form, right? That's what it looks like to forgive. But again, it's so important for us to have compassion. Remember when I just said in the example, I know it was a tense conversation. That's a part of compassion. Why? Because we know in tense conversations, sometimes people say things they don't necessarily mean. That's what that looks like, right? So that's what forgiveness, that's how we would forgive. And then if you don't have access to the person, you could journal about it. You could pray about it, doing the same thing, but you release it. You let it go. And then you might ask a question, well, then Keith, how do I know if I actually forgave this person? How do I know if I forgave my husband? How do I know if I forgave my wife? How do I know if I forgave them? if you can encounter them and there's no residual from whatever it is you forgave them for. So, and let's say you use an extreme example. Let's say infidelity took place, right? And you forgave your spouse, and then they asked for forgiveness. You forgave their spouse, and they did the work, right? You guys have done the work. You've gone to therapy. You've done the skills. Everything. You could then, that situation would come up again. Not situation of the infidelity, but the conversation would come up again in a retelling or something along those lines. There's no emotions tied to it. Then you're really forgiven. Like it's all gone. The debt's been completely and totally released. So I want you to think of it along those lines. That's how you know you forgave somebody. If you can engage with them, afterwards, right? And there's no residual. You're not thinking about it. It's not playing in your mind. You're not, oh my gosh, I can't believe they don't know what they did. It's none of that. It's none of that. The residual is gone. It's gone. They're free. Again, the debt's gone. Right? I remember I owed, who was it? I owed City Cards, I think like $10,000 or something like that, right? And I couldn't pay it back at the time. So they wrote it off, hit my credit, whatever. But City Cards is moving on. Citibank, they moved on. They were, rocking and rolling, right? No problem, no harm, no foul, right? So I came back and I was talking to City Card and I said, hey, if I can give you guys your money back, can you get this off my credit? They said, sure, whatever, right? And so the purpose I'm bringing that up for is because when it comes to like forgiveness and working through certain things, right, and then not having any residual effect, there was outside of, obviously credit, but outside of that, there was no residual effect, right? City Card wasn't coming for me. They weren't attacking me. They weren't doing anything along those lines, right? They did what they had to do. Okay, well, this is the process. It goes on the credit, but we keep it moving, right? So there's no residual after that. So that's how you know you've really forgiven and let something go. Right, that there's no residual feelings, no hurt, no malice, no nothing like that if that situation comes back up. But if it does, then you need to process through it. Take time to process through it, and especially if your spouse is listening. And this is also a big part as well, because forgiveness doesn't have to necessarily be a one-way street, right? It could be a two-way street, right? Because if I'm forgiving someone, right, I'm releasing someone. Or releasing my wife, for example, for something, right? I'm not holding anything against her and we're having a conversation. Guess what? She could also be empathetic in the moment too and say, you know what? Hey, I am sorry. I appreciate you forgiving me. I am sorry that I did cause you that hurt and that pain, right? And so for those things that might take a little bit more time, if you're the offending party, right, it's not them dangling over your head. It's your love for them that I want to make sure you're good. I'm not doing those things anymore. I'm doing something different. Right, I'm building up a relationship. I'm pouring into you. I'm listening. I'm blocking all other people. Like I'm focusing, honed in on you. But I understand that thing hurt you that I did. I'm gonna walk with you to help you heal from that. I'm gonna reassure you, so you can actually help if there is residual emotion there. You can literally help your spouse process through it just by being with them in the moment, being empathetic, validating their concern, not saying, oh my gosh, you're bringing this up again. How long is it going to take for you to heal? No. It should be, hey, I want to be here to help you. Heck, because I love you. I didn't mean to hurt you. I'm so sorry you had to go through that. I know this is rough. Those conversations you were having that keep turning to arguments over past situations, you know how fast they would be resolved if you moved like that? If you were empathetic and you were validating, instead of trying to defend yourself or tell people to get over it. If you could just say if something came up, I'll give you an example. I remember my wife, she used to get, emotional because we never had like a wedding, right? We did like the courthouse thing. We never had like a wedding. So she would see like certain shows and things like that with weddings. And sometimes she'd get teary eyed and things like that. Now, I'll be honest, like as I always am, there were times I'm like, oh my gosh, it's not even that big of a deal. Oh man, no one's gonna spend. What's the sense of spending all that money on a wedding anyways, and blah blah blah, and so on and so forth. Now I don't know how much I've ever said that to her or I thought it, but I've definitely thought it, right? But eventually, when it started happening, right? And actually, back then, I know I didn't say it because back then I would actually shut down. I was very the avoidant type. I didn't deal well with emotions and things of that nature, so I knew I shut down, right? But fast forward in the future, that when those things would happen and I became more mature and I learned more skills and I wasn't so avoidant, then guess what happened? When those things would come up, I'd be like, yeah, babe, I know that might make it kind of hard, right? Because, you want a wedding and you want the dress and the family and things like that and the celebration. And, Hey, I'm sorry I couldn't give that to you at the time. I recognize that, that could be difficult. Just validation and empathy, validation and empathy, validation and empathy, you know. And if you really are really planning on doing something later on, you could also try to do something to rectify it. Like, yeah, in that case, I don't think I ever said that we would. I think might have said like, maybe our 20th anniversary or something along those lines. We could do something and bring everybody together and things of that nature. But long story short, if you're gonna say, you make sure you can pull it off, right? Otherwise, it's a whole nother talk for another time. But long story short, right? Long story short, that's how a partner can help their significant other process through an offense that they did. It doesn't have to be like, well, Keith said you just got to do it on your own. Just forgive. This is all you. You got to let go of that resentment. Because sometimes we have to take that stance. And I'm not saying that the responsibility has to be like, on the other person, right? But it's the love of your life. You can help. If there's room for you to help, like right now, there's room for you to help. Why not? It's the love of your life. That's your other half. Or that's someone you want to be your other half. So help. Right? So that's what happens. That's what you do. That's how you know if you really forgave. If there's any residual left, it's still some stuff that needs to be worked through. Right. And then again, the offending spouse, you can help your partner process through that. Your husband, your wife, your boyfriend, you can help them process through that just by being validated and empathizing with them as they're bringing these things up. Right. And reassuring them of their love, and also changing your behavior. Changing behavior is really important. Again, I don't want to get into all that. But the last part of this, right? The last part of this, because this is actually what keeps us from forgiving and having compassion more than anything else, right? This question: what if they do it again? And if you think I'm going to reference what I said about the Bible and 70 times 7, I'm not, right? I'm not going to reference that. Because there's nowhere where it says you have to allow yourself to be treated poorly, right? So let's say your spouse is, I don't know, let's say they get loud, right, at you and start yelling. They're communication is poor. You don't like it. It hurts you. You shared it. They said they're sorry. They do it again. You said that you tell them again, hurt me. They say they're sorry. It happens again. Now, obviously, I'm not saying get a divorce, clearly, right? But the answer to this question is, what if they do it again? Boundaries. Boundaries, 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 boundaries. I cannot stress it enough. Boundaries, you must have them. Because the sooner you identify what your boundaries are, and the sooner you start enforcing them, the less you have to worry about this question of what if it happens again. Right. So let me explain something to you. And I'm not going to go into boundaries in this one because that's actually the next step, right? And it's critical because forgiveness and compassion without boundaries is enabling. I'm going to say it one more time. If it's important, I always say it twice. Forgiveness and compassion without boundaries is enabling. You are enabling poor behavior. You're enabling poor treatment, and you are engaging and becoming the engine of your own destruction. When you let things go, and you let things go, and you let things go. I'm not saying you got to fight every battle, but you should have some strong boundaries that, hey, don't cross these lines. Because I'm valuable. I know my worth. I know my value. I don't want to be treated this way. And so therefore I have these boundaries to keep me safe. And if you love me like you say you love me, you're going to honor and respect these boundaries. You should be talking about them in the dating phase, early in the dating phase. Why early in the dating phase? Because if you're interested in getting married, doesn't it make sense to make sure you teach the person who you potentially could marry how to treat you from the very beginning? Why would you allow them to treat you horrible for 5, 10, 15 years, or for finally you're like, now I'm ready for boundaries? Now you have certain behaviors and habits, and now it looks like you're just trying to be controlling, or it wasn't like this before, or why are you switching up and da-da-da-da-da. No, from the very beginning, we can be teaching boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, if you're not good with boundaries, then you probably shouldn't be dating yet. Just saying. But if you are dating, you're in a relationship, or you are married, right? Then start putting boundaries in place now. And you don't got to be, super aggressive with it. You can just let whoever your significant other is, right? Your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your husband, your wife, just let them know, hey, listen, I've lived a long time without having boundaries. I didn't know my value. I didn't know my worth. I didn't know how I want to be treated. And you can even say, and that wasn't fair to you, right? Because sometimes we hold people accountable for disrespecting boundaries we never taught them nor enforced. Great, perfect example, right? Your kids, you want them to have listen to you the first time you speak. You want them to go get a bath. Your kid's playing a game. You say, hey, Johnny, go get a bath. Johnny ignores you. You say, hey, Johnny, go get a bath. Johnny ignores you. Third time, fourth time, fifth time, sixth time. Now, seventh time you come and you want to yell at Johnny. You want to tell him how he's disrespectful and how he's so rude. And you told him all these times, and I'm going to give you something to cry about. I'm going to bust up the TV. I'm going to throw these stupid games out. And da-da-da. Now you're blowing up and looking crazy. Is it Johnny's fault? Or is it your fault for not upholding the boundary and upholding the standard? It's the same thing in our relationships. Right? Same thing in your marriage, same thing in your relationship. A lot of times we want to get mad at the other person. The way you're talking to me is disrespectful. The way you're talking to me is disrespectful. How you're disrespecting me. And now you're going back and forth and you're yelling and you're screaming and you never set a boundary. You don't got to get bucked with the other person. Whoa, hold on. Time out. I don't like to be talked to that way. I've talked to you about this before. You start raising your voice at me, I find it disrespectful. Please lower your tone, right? I'm right here. I want to engage with you. I want to help you get through what you're getting through. I want to have this conversation, but it can't be like this. You just got to lower your tone. I want to hear. All right. You set the boundary. Teach the person how you want to be treated. And if for whatever reason they can't do it in the moment, then guess what? You didn't force the boundary and just, I don't like the way I'm being treated right now. I'm not going to stand for it, so I'm going to leave this conversation. And if you're ready to, when you're ready, let me know and then we can reconvene. Right. So we got to be able to have boundaries, right? You got to be able to have boundaries. This part right here, yes, why I said compassion is like the heart of this. Forgiveness is all important and things like that. We got to forgive and all those things. It's all well and good, but you must have boundaries for this to work properly, because otherwise all you're going to end up doing is enabling bad behavior, and then start making excuses from, oh, he had a bad day. Oh, what she went through. It's her past. It's what she went through. I just got to be more loving and more kind, And yeah, I know she put her hands on me, but, she was just having a rough time. Or, yeah, I know he cheated, but, I know it's the third time, but, you don't know what he went through. He just said, come on now. Good and well, I wish these were just stories I was making up. Good and well, they're not. This is reality. We find ourselves trying to be all like forgiving and have compassion and stuff like that. But the reality of the situation is we're enabling bad behavior. It's okay for us to say no. It's okay for us to have boundaries. It's okay for us to say how we want to be treated, right? So again, I know I said, we're not going to be going into this at the next live stream, and we're not, right? There's ways to have boundaries, ways to identify them, all that stuff. We're going to talk about that in the next live stream, because you got to make sure you have boundaries, not just personal boundaries, but relationship boundaries as well. But we'll get into all that next time. So let's do a really quick recap, right? What is forgiveness? It's the complete release and erasure of debt, right? You're letting go of that emotional debt that you're holding on to that because of an offense that someone did to you, right? Compassion, what is that? That's the understanding, validation, and empathy towards someone else's experience and what they've been through. And again, if you don't know their experience, just know that whatever behavior deviates from what's normal baseline human interaction, which is generally kind, or at least very neutral, if it deviates from that, it's really, really low, or it's really, really high, or super aggressive, or something else is going on that is causing to deviate. You don't have to know what it is, but it's causing to deviate. That's what compassion is, right? Why do we forgive? Because it frees us. It frees us from holding on to that weight of hurt and pain and resentment. And we want to be free. We want to be able to move forward without having to deal with, holding on to those things. And especially in our relationships, right? When our marriages and our relationships, it's very difficult to build a relationship with someone you're harboring, resentment towards or unforgiveness towards, right? So you got to be able to let that stuff go. And again, compassion, it's a form of protection, right? If I know why they're doing what they're doing, I know exactly what's going on, right? So it keeps me from starting to think of different scenarios of how they're trying to do this to hurt me and how they're trying to, undermine me and how they're trying to manipulate me and all these things. We get a chance to circumvent all that and be like, I understand why they do what they do and what they've been through. I get that. I understand that's where that behavior is coming from. Okay. Now, talk about how do we forgive? Remember, you got to have compassion first, right? Understand where they're going through, where they're coming from, have that, be able to validate. And remember, compassion doesn't mean that you agree. It doesn't mean you allow for the behavior. It doesn't mean you condone the behavior. It just means I understand the behavior and my heart goes out to you for having to go through the thing that's causing this behavior, right? That's all compassion is, okay? And then once you recognize, you recognize the offense that happened, right? And then as far as the experiences, then it's not about you, it's about them. And you're able to release it. I know my husband's going through it, or I know my wife is going through it. So, hey, I forgive them. And we talked about going through the SIR method. Hey, that thing that happened last night when you called me that name, or when you said it, maybe it's objective, right? Make sure, it's objective. When that thing happened, that hurt me, right? When that thing happened, I was hurt. This is why I was hurt. Again, because of my childhood or, just made me feel less than or whatever the case may be. And then the last R is a release. Hey, I don't want to hold this against you. I love you. I care about you. So I'm just letting you know I forgive you and I don't want to hold on to it. I want it to be close, right? That's what that would look like. That's what that would sound like. Put anything else in there. Again, it's the same communication method we use across the board with anything else. Situation, emotion, reason. And again, in this case, it's not request. In this case, it's release, right? So, all right. And how do I know if they're really forgiven? Well, there's no residual from the event. You think about the event, it comes up, you have no feelings towards it. You can engage with the person, right? You're not holding on to it. You're not looking at him like, oh my gosh, I can't believe, he did that. And who's he think he is? And he's coming over to me trying to give me a kiss. And, I don't even like him like that. No. There's still unforgiveness there, she rejected me 3 times this week for intimacy, and now she wants me to go wash her car and this, and that, and that. And, how dare she? And I'm not going to do it. And no. There's residual there. We got to work through that. Remember, forgiveness only hurts you. Unforgiveness only hurts you. It doesn't hurt anybody else. So you got to make sure you release it and let it go. And the last part, what happens if they do it again? Well, you have boundaries. Right? Set your boundaries because those are what keep you safe. And remember again, forgiveness and compassion without boundaries is enabling. You're allowing the behavior, you're feeding the behavior, the same behavior you don't want. So you got to have boundaries. And again, we'll go into that in the next live stream in more detail about what exactly that looks like and how boundaries show up in our relationships. Because believe it or not, yes, we're close. Yes, the two become one. And it's like, how can the two that become one now have individual boundaries and things like that? We'll get into all that in the next live stream. So you'll know exactly what boundaries are, how to set them, what the consequences look like, what they're based off of, and how to do it in a loving way. Right, not a controlling way, not a manipulative way, but in a way that keeps you safe, that protects the relationship, that protects your bond, and it also allows your partner to show up and love you the way you want to be loved and treat you how you want to be treated, as opposed to just trying to guess or just go based off how they want to be treated. All right. So if you need any help with this, also, when it comes to boundaries, I guess we'll talk about that tomorrow. But if you want to get a head start on it, I have actually a workbook that talks about boundaries in 9 different domains, and you can check that out. If you would like, if you struggle with boundaries, talks about 9 different domains, talks about how to set them, how to identify your values that are tied to the certain boundaries, and gives you a pretty good working framework on how to establish certain boundaries in certain areas, right? Because we know we have a lot of different ways we want to be treated. So try to sit there and try to figure out boundaries for every single one is unrealistic and not effective. So this workbook helps to kind of guide you through the 9 different areas that we generally interact in our life, and allows you to set those different boundaries, or at least recognize what those boundaries are and why they're there, and then what kind of consequences you put in place in order to execute those boundaries and make sure that they're respected and honored, right? And also, as I say before, You never want to just cut someone off as the immediate thing. If you find yourself cutting people off after one offense, that's probably not a boundary you're trying to set. It's probably a fear thing that's going on with you because you're scared to get hurt. So you're cutting people off before they can hurt you further. Some of you actually cut people off before they even hurt you at all because you're so terrified. That's actually not a boundary issue. That's a fear issue. That's an emotional regulation issue. Again, we'll talk about that probably not within this series, but we'll talk about that at another time. But in any case, you guys take care. Have a great, awesome, and blessed day. And remember, always remember that you are not alone. All right. Forgive and have